I Will Believe. Prologue. The Dream. She wakes up at 3 a.m. and instantly knows the dream is slipping away. Not slowly, not gently, it's leaving all at once, like water running through your fingers when you try to hold it too tight. The face is already gone. It was there a second ago, and now there's nothing, just the feeling that it existed, blurred, undefined, like a reflection on fogged glass. Sophie doesn't move. She keeps her eyes closed, instinctively, as if opening them would scare away whatever is left. The voice is still there, low, calm, with a pause before every important word. She hears it like it's underwater, distant, distorted, but still there, and she holds on to it as if that's something you can actually hold. There was also a gesture. The man in the dream kept brushing his hair back, slow, automatic, dragging a loose strand across his eyebrow. She saw it more than once, and somehow that's what stayed, not his face, just that small, meaningless movement. And the words stayed stronger than anything else. She doesn't know why, but they don't fade. They remain clear and still, while everything else dissolves. He was talking about love, not dramatically, not like a speech, like he was explaining something simple, something obvious that people somehow keep missing. She lies there repeating every word in her head, afraid to lose even one. Love is when you can wait for someone, even if you've never met them. When you look at other people and immediately know it's not them. You believe that person exists even when there are so many options around you. But something inside keeps saying, not this one, not yet, wait a little longer. She repeats it again and again. Then something else appears. An angel, or at least that's what it felt like in the dream. Not wings, not light, nothing from a children's book, just a presence, quiet, absolute, the kind that doesn't scare you, it calms you, like someone turned the volume of the world down. The angel gives her one thing before disappearing, a number, 5 digits. She hears it and immediately starts repeating it in her head, fast, like a prayer, like something you say to keep it from disappearing, digit by digit, over and over. The angel says, tomorrow, a test. Across the country, thousands of different versions, each with its own number. You will get this one. And then it's gone. The dream disappears completely. The face is long gone. The voice fades. Only 2 things remain. The words about love and the number. She holds on to both as tightly as she can, like they're the only things she managed to save from something that's already gone. The test. She didn't sleep until 5. She lay there, repeating the number, in her head, then in a whisper, then back in her head again. She was afraid to fall asleep, afraid she would wake up and it would be gone, just like the rest of the dream. And all that would be left is the feeling that something had been there. The room was dark. A thin line of streetlight stretched across the ceiling through a gap in the curtains. Sophie lay still, staring at that line, repeating the number again and again, like a spell, like a prayer, like something you can't let go of, because the moment you do, it disappears. At 5, she got up, took a notebook, wrote it down, 5 digits. On a clean page under the date, big, careful, no room for mistakes. She looked at it, then again, checking the order, making sure every digit was exactly where it should be. She put the notebook under her pillow. Only then she fell asleep. In the morning, she woke up to the smell of eggs frying. Her mom was already in the kitchen. Sophie lay still for a second, eyes closed, and reached under the pillow. The notebook, still there. She got up, washed her face with cold water, quick, automatic, and looked at herself in the mirror. Just a regular 12-year-old girl. Dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night. Nothing unusual. No one would ever guess. At breakfast, her mom was talking about the weather, about a scarf, about something else. Sophie nodded, ate, and looked out the window. It was gray outside. The leaves on the chestnut tree were starting to turn yellow at the edges. A normal morning, a normal day, just not for her. She didn't repeat the number anymore. She didn't need to. It stayed. She took a longer route to school that day, through the street by the park, then a narrow lane near the market. The park was empty at that hour, just pigeons on benches and wet leaves on the pavement after the night rain. There was the smell of damp earth and grass, that quiet autumn smell that only exists in the morning before the sun dries everything out. The market was already loud, voices, the squeak of carts, someone laughing in the distance, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. But for her, it didn't matter. The silence of the park and the noise of the market meant the same thing. No one was interrupting her. She walked, and the number was there. The test started at 9. The class gathered earlier than usual, everyone a little tense. Some were flipping through notes in the hallway, some whispering to each other. Sophie sat at her desk, third from the window. She placed her pen in front of her, didn't open anything, and just sat there, watching a cloud slowly move across the sky outside. The teacher walked in with a sealed envelope, thick, official, with a blue stamp in the corner. She placed it on the desk. The room went quiet, that kind of quiet that happens right before something important. The teacher waited a second, then opened it. Inside was a stack of tickets, white, identical, thick paper, each with a number in the top right corner. "Come up one by one," she said. "Take one without looking." Chairs moved, voices dropped. Students went up to the desk, took a ticket, flipped it, checked the number. Some sighed, some smiled, some immediately sat down and opened their pencil cases. The stack was getting smaller. Sophie didn't count. She just waited. When it was her turn, she didn't rush. She stepped up to the desk. There were a few tickets left, 7, maybe 8, all identical. She reached out and took the top one. Didn't look. The paper felt cool in her hand, new, with that faint smell of ink. She walked back to her desk, sat down, and placed the ticket in front of her, face down. She didn't listen to her heartbeat. She waited a second, then turned it over. The number was there. 5 digits, black on white, clear, simple. The world went quiet for a second. It was the same, exactly the same, the one in her notebook, the one she repeated until 5 in the morning. She looked at those 5 digits and felt something strange, not joy, not fear, something quieter, deeper, like something that was supposed to happen had happened, like somewhere far away, something said, "Yes, that's right." Sophie placed the ticket on the desk, straight and aligned with the edge. She took her pen and opened her notebook. Around her, someone asked for a pencil. The teacher told them not to talk. A car passed outside, then another. All of it went past her. Then everything came back, the room, the test in front of her. She looked at the first question and started writing, calmly, neatly, like always. Nothing had changed on the outside, but inside it already had. She knew, somewhere in the future, there is a person, and she will meet him. Part 1. The First Breakup. He was 27. She was 24. They met in their 3rd year at university. He had just transferred from another city and ended up in the same group of friends at the same party. He didn't talk much. He listened more than he spoke. and had a habit of looking people in the eyes a little longer than usual. Sophie liked that. They were together for 2 years. He was kind, not sometimes, not when it was convenient, but just naturally kind. He called when he said he would, remembered small things, and never raised his voice. Being with him was easy. Same friends, similar routines, a calm and steady rhythm. And Sophie tried. She really tried to open up completely, tried to stop waiting for that feeling that never came. She told herself, this is what love is, not fireworks, not chaos, just a quiet, steady presence next to you. She tried to convince herself that movies lie and that people who talk about a spark just haven't grown up yet. She almost believed it. But somewhere deeper, in that place you can't lie to, there was always the same thing. Quiet, persistent, like a distant sound you only notice when everything else is silent. Not this. One evening, nothing special about it, they were sitting in their usual cafe near the university. Same table, same order, same Friday routine. They were talking about normal things, his exam, her coursework, plans for the weekend. And in the middle of that conversation, she suddenly realized she had already made the decision. She put down her fork. I need to tell you something. He looked up, saw something in her face, and put his fork down too. I'm listening. I can't do this anymore, she said. Not because you did anything wrong. You didn't. It's just, this isn't it. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her, calm but focused, like he was trying to understand what was behind those words. Not it. How? Sophie opened her mouth and closed it. How do you explain something you don't even have words for? That it's good with him, but not fully? That she keeps waiting for something she can't even describe? That after 2 years that feeling didn't go away, it just learned how to stay quiet? It's just not it, she said again. I'm sorry. He nodded slowly. No anger. You know I love you, he said quietly. I know, she answered. A pause followed. And you don't? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. They both understood. He stood up and took his jacket from the back of the chair. He paused for a second, not leaving yet, just standing there and looking somewhere between her and the window. Who is he? There's no one. But there's something, or someone in your head. Sophie looked down at her hands. I don't know, she said quietly. He left. He didn't slam the door. He just walked out. She watched him through the window as he passed by. He didn't turn around. She stayed at the table. A waitress walked past with a tray. Someone at the next table laughed too loudly, and a tram passed outside. Her dinner was cold. She knew she did the right thing, the same way she knew the number back then. But doing the right thing doesn't make it easy. He loved her, really loved her, patiently and without pressure, and she took that love, lived in it for 2 years, and then put down her fork and said, not this. That hurt, not like a breakup, but something heavier and duller, somewhere under her ribs. It was the kind of pain that comes from knowing he's going home now, and it's worse for him than it is for her, and she knows it, and there's nothing she can do, because the only alternative, staying, would have been a bigger lie. Sometimes honesty is the cruelest thing you can give someone. She picked up her fork and finished her dinner, slowly, without tasting it, just to keep her hands busy.
Years passed. Not dramatically, not with big events, just passed, the way time does when you live a normal life. University, first job, second job, a small apartment you rent on your own, then eventually one you buy on your own. Sophie grew older the same way everyone does, slowly, almost without noticing, until one day you look in the mirror and realize something has changed, even if you can't say exactly when. There were relationships, more than one. After the first, there were two more. Maybe three, if you count the one that didn't even last a month and never got a name. Different men, different situations, different rhythms. One was funny and unreliable. Another was stable and boring. The third was interesting until he became predictable. And every time, the same feeling lived somewhere deep inside. Not this. She wasn't searching for him, she was just living her life. And every time someone new appeared, something inside her would quietly, without explanation, make a mark. She didn't compare them to the dream, that would have been pointless. She didn't even remember the face, she just knew, and let them go. She was 27 when her friend Emma got married. It was June at a small restaurant outside the city with white peonies on every table. Sophie sat there, watching her friend, genuinely happy, glowing in a way that almost felt too intimate to look at, like you were witnessing something private. There were toasts and laughter. Someone tapped a glass, asking the couple to kiss. At the next table, a woman in her 50s leaned closer and said with a warm smile, "You're next, right?" Sophie smiled back. "We'll see," she said. The woman nodded as if "we'll see" meant yes, of course, soon, and turned back to her conversation. Later that evening, near the exit, Emma took Sophie's hand and whispered, "You'll find your person. I know you will." Sophie squeezed her hand back but said nothing. Some things just don't belong in a wedding hallway, whispered between two people. She was 30 when her mom called on a Sunday morning, just to talk. How are you? How's work? Are you sleeping well? And then, casually, in that way that isn't casual at all, she asked, "Do you remember Vasil Petrenko, Nadia's son from our street? He's a good man, a doctor. Divorced last year, but on good terms. No kids. Nadia said he—" "Mom," she interrupted gently, "please don't." There was a short pause. "Well, I'm just saying," her mom replied. "You're not a girl anymore, Sophie. You're 30. "I know how old I am," she said. "Well, think about it." Sophie looked out the window. Sunday morning, early autumn. The tree outside was already half yellow. Down below, a family was walking a dog, a father, a mother, a little girl in a red jacket. "Okay, Mom, I'll think about it." She hung up, sat there for a minute, and then got up to make coffee. She was 33 when her colleague Dan asked her directly. They were walking back from lunch through a gray November with wet pavement and coffee in paper cups. Dan was the kind of person who says exactly what he thinks and is genuinely surprised when people don't like it. "Hey, do you actually want a family, kids?" "I do," she answered. "Then why are you alone?" "Because the right person hasn't shown up yet," she said calmly. Dan repeated the word right like it sounded slightly ridiculous. Then he said, "Maybe there is no right person. Maybe you just choose from who's there. And who decided there has to be someone special anyway?" Sophie listened and didn't interrupt. "You're too picky," Dan concluded. "Maybe," she said. "There's no such thing as perfect people," Dan added. "I know. I'm not looking for perfect," Sophie replied. "Then what are you looking for?" She looked down at her cup. "My person," she said simply. Dan didn't respond. They reached the office in silence. For him, the conversation was over, but Sophie knew this conversation had happened dozens of times before, with different people, in different places, always the same words: too picky, time is passing, no one is perfect. And every time, the same feeling lived somewhere deep inside. I will believe. Two simple words, but they stood firm, like something that had already taken root. Time was passing, but that feeling never left. I will believe. She was 34 when she tried to explain it out loud for the first time. Not the dream,
She had stopped talking about the dream years ago, but the feeling, the thing that had lived inside her all this time and never let her stay completely with anyone. She and Emma were sitting in the kitchen late in the evening, tea, leftover cake from Emma's son's birthday. Her husband was asleep, the child too, and the apartment had that rare kind of silence that only exists when everyone else is already asleep and you're still awake. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said, setting her cup down. Sophie looked at her tea. "Go ahead." Emma hesitated for a second. "Are you happy?" "Yes," Sophie said. "Overall, yes." "But?" "There's no but, just overall." Emma didn't respond immediately. Then, more carefully, she added, "Soph, we've known each other for 20 years. I can see you're carrying something. You always have. And I never asked, because you don't like being asked, but today I'm asking." Sophie looked up. Emma wasn't pushing or guessing. She was just waiting. Sophie wrapped both hands around her cup. "Do you remember that dream?" she asked quietly. "The one I told you about back in university? The one with the angel?" Emma nodded. "I remember." Sophie took a breath. "I'm still living with it. Not the dream itself, but the feeling that there's someone, that I haven't met him yet, but he exists." She paused, searching for the words. "And every time I've been with someone, that feeling when you're absolutely sure it's not it, but you can't explain why?" Emma nodded slowly. "I think I do." "It's always like that," Sophie said. Emma turned her cup in her hands. "Maybe it's just fear," she said carefully. "Maybe you created an ideal in your head, and now you compare everyone to it without even realizing." "Maybe," Sophie said. "And if that's true?" Sophie looked at her. "If it is, then I've lived with it for 22 years, and I still can't do it any other way." Emma watched her for a long moment. "You're not afraid," she said, finally, stating it as a fact. Sophie shook her head slightly. "I am. I'm afraid I'm wrong, that I've wasted years on something that doesn't exist, that one day I'll wake up and realize I missed everything." She set the cup down and met Emma's eyes. "But I'm more afraid of something else. Staying with someone and saying yes just because I'm tired of waiting. That would be a lie, to him and to myself." There was a soft, full silence. "That's why I will believe," Sophie said. "Not louder, just clearer. Not because I'm romantic or naive, but because I don't know how not to." Somewhere outside, a car passed, then silence again. Emma exhaled. "Okay," she said with a small smile. "Then I'll believe too, for company." Sophie laughed, quietly and a little tiredly. Emma laughed too. Later that night, Sophie sat on her windowsill with a cup of tea. The city below was alive. Lights, shadows, distant movement. The conversation had shifted something, not solved or changed it, but just loosened it, the way things do after you've said more than you planned. She thought about what she'd admitted, that she was afraid. It was true, she was afraid, but the fear had never been stronger than that quiet, stubborn, unmoving certainty. Somewhere out there, she didn't know where or who, there was someone, and she believed it. Not blindly, not without doubt, but the way you believe in something you cannot prove and still feel, completely, that it's true. I will believe. Part 2. Boarding. The train was leaving at 11:20 p.m. Sophie arrived early, about 40 minutes ahead, like she always did. She liked that space between "I'm already here" and "I don't have to go anywhere yet," when you can just sit, watch people, and let your thoughts go quiet. The station moved in its own evening rhythm. A family with oversized suitcases was trying to find their carriage. Two students were eating something out of paper bags on a bench. A woman in a sand-colored coat was reading, not looking up. Somewhere behind her, a child kept asking how long the trip would be, and the mother kept answering, "Not long," in that tone people use when they don't really know. Sophie sat with a paper cup of coffee, watching the departure board. She was going to visit a friend, not Emma, Claire. They hadn't seen each other in a couple of years, and for a long time it had been one of those "we should really do this" things that never quite happened. Until now. 3 days, no plans, nowhere to rush. She was looking forward to it, quietly, without overthinking it. Boarding was announced. The carriage was half empty, which she liked. Sophie found her compartment, placed her bag on the shelf, and took the seat by the window. She pulled out her book, set it on her lap, but didn't open it. Instead, she watched the platform slowly fill with people. He stepped into the compartment about 7 minutes before departure. She noticed him from the corner of her eye, then looked back at the window. He placed something on the upper shelf, sat down across from her, and pulled out his phone. Dark sweater, a couple of weeks' stubble, thick-framed glasses, and something tired in the way he moved. Not relaxed, but worn out, like he hadn't been still in a long time and wasn't sure how anymore. She registered it, then let it go. The train started moving. The platform slid back, then the station, then the city, dense and bright at first, then thinner, then gone. Darkness took over, broken only by scattered lights outside the window. Sophie opened her book and tried to read. Her thoughts drifted anyway. The trip, the few quiet days ahead, the simple relief of having nowhere urgent to be. It would be good. It had been a while since something felt simply good without needing a reason. After a while, she lowered the book and looked at the window again. Darkness, occasional lights, and their reflection in the glass. He wasn't looking at his phone anymore, just sitting there, staring somewhere between the floor and his own thoughts. The conductor came by with tea, setting 2 paper cups on the small table. "Thanks," he said quietly, almost automatically, without looking up. His voice was low and even. Sophie took her cup. They sat in silence. Not awkward, just quiet. The kind of silence that happens between strangers on a night train, when no one is in a hurry and conversation isn't expected. A small station light passed outside and disappeared. The train kept moving. He spoke first, maybe 20 minutes later. He lifted his eyes and said, without any real reason, "Going far?" His voice was calm, neutral, not trying to impress, not trying to start anything, just breaking the silence because it had run its course. "Out of town," Sophie said. "You?" "Same." A short pause. "Work or just getting away?" he asked. "Visiting a friend for a few days," she said. He nodded, glanced at the window, then back at her. "It's nice," he said quietly, "going somewhere without a plan." Not really to her, more like thinking out loud. Sophie looked at him. He was watching the dark glass, and there was something in that look that felt familiar. It took her a second to place it. That's how people look when they needed to leave, not go to someone, just away, from something or from themselves. She recognized it. She'd traveled like that too. Not often, but enough. "Yeah," she said simply. "It is." And somehow, that was the beginning. The first hour. The conversation started with the book. Sophie placed it on the table, cover facing up, just to free her hands. He glanced at it, not deliberately, just catching the title. A small pause. He tilted his head slightly, the way people do when they read something at an angle. "Is it good?" he asked. "Very," she said. I'm reading it for the second time." He raised his eyebrows a little. "I read it once," he said. "Maybe I should have read it twice." "Some books only open up the second time," Sophie said. "When you already know how it ends, you start noticing completely different things." He thought for a second, not looking at her, but somewhere down at the table. "Or it just gets sadder," he said, "when you know how it ends." She looked at him. He was still looking at the book, calm, almost distant. "Depends on the book," she said. "Yeah," he nodded, and smiled slightly, just one corner of his mouth, the first real smile of the evening. At first, they stayed with books. It turned out their tastes overlapped, and didn't. He didn't like Coelho. She did sometimes. "When you need something that comforts you a little," she said. "I don't want to be comforted." Then that explains it. He looked at her again, and smiled the same way. Then cities. He asked where she'd been, what she remembered most. She told him about Lisbon, a city that moves slowly and never apologizes for it, about the smell of salt and old wood, the sound of trams climbing uphill, the way everything turns slightly golden in the evening, even when the sky is gray. He listened, really listened, not waiting for his turn to speak. She found herself talking longer than she meant to. He said he'd been there once, in winter. "And?" she asked. "It felt sad," he said. "It is a little sad, but in a beautiful way. There's a difference." "There is," he agreed, after a moment. "I just couldn't feel it back then." She didn't ask why. He didn't explain. But something in that sentence stayed between them, quiet, almost invisible. Then he mentioned a park. They were talking about places they loved in different cities, not the obvious ones, but the personal ones, the kind you don't find in guides. He spoke a little slower now, like he was choosing his words more carefully. "There's this park," he said, "in your city, actually. It has an old carousel, really old, slightly crooked, makes that soft metal sound when it moves. And there's a stand nearby that sells cotton candy, just the simple kind, pink. It melts instantly, but you still end up getting another one." He smiled briefly at the memory. "For some reason, it tastes better there, or maybe it was just the evening." "I know that place," Sophie said. "You do?" "I've been there a lot, since I was a kid. My mom used to take me on that carousel. I thought it was incredibly fast back then." "And the carousel?" "The same one. Still creaks, still works." He laughed, quietly, but genuinely this time. Something lighter, warmer. She smiled too. "Small world," he said. "Small," she agreed. Outside, a small station passed by. A few lights, a dark platform, a single figure standing near the edge. Then it was gone. Just darkness again. The train kept moving. The tea had gone cold. Sophie held the cup anyway, just for the feeling of it in her hands. Outside, darkness, broken by occasional lights. They kept talking and listening the same way. "Do you take night trains often?" he asked. "Not really, but I like them. There's something about it. When you're moving, but you don't have to be anywhere yet. You're just in between." "Yeah," he said quietly. "Exactly." He fell silent for a moment. Sophie looked at the window. Darkness, their reflection, the steady rhythm of the train. "It feels good," she thought. "Just good." Deep night. The overhead lights had been turned off a while ago. Only the night lighting remained, dim, bluish, not meant for reading, just enough so the space wouldn't disappear completely. The compartment felt different in it, smaller, quieter, as if the rest of the world had moved a little farther away. Sometime after 1, the conductor passed through the corridor. Soft steps. A door creaked faintly at the end of the carriage, then silence again. They were still talking. No one suggested going to sleep. No one checked the time in that subtle way people do when they're ready to end a conversation. They just kept talking. The night continued. The train kept moving. Nothing else seemed to exist. He spoke. She listened. "Do you live alone?" she asked at one point. "No," he said. A brief pause. "I'm engaged." Sophie nodded. He didn't expand on it, and she didn't push. She just took it in and set it aside, like a simple fact. "And you?" he asked. "On my own," she said. "For long?" "For a while." He looked at her, attentive, without pressure. She held his gaze spokojna. "Your choice?" he asked. She thought for a second. "Not exactly," she said. "More like I couldn't choose anything else." He didn't answer right away, looked at the window, at the dark glass, at his own reflection. "I get that," he said, quietly. A small station passed outside, a few lights, an empty platform, a brief wash of yellow, then darkness again. "I have a friend," Sophie said, "who's obsessed with an actor, watches every interview, never misses anything." "And?" he asked. "Nothing. Just there are people who can hold the attention of millions. I've always wondered what that feels like, off camera." He was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes," he said, "it feels very tiring." Sophie glanced at him. He didn't explain, she didn't ask, but something in the way he said it, without bitterness, just as a fact, lingered. He smiled faintly into the dark and ran a hand through his hair, slowly, absently, brushing his fringe across his brow. She noticed the gesture, and something in her went still for a moment. "Do you believe things happen for a reason?" he asked later. "Not always, but sometimes, yes." "Like when?" She looked at the window. Darkness outside, scattered lights appearing and disappearing in the distance. "Like when you meet someone in a place you didn't expect, and the conversation turns out better than the ones you've had with people you've known for years." He was quiet for a second, looking somewhere between her and the reflection in the glass. "That happens," he said. "It does." Silence followed. Not empty, just unhurried. The kind where the next word could come, but doesn't have to. Somewhere in the next compartment, someone turned in their sleep. A faint creak, then quiet again. The steady rhythm of the train underneath it all. Then he spoke, slowly, as if continuing a thought that had been forming for a long time. "Love is when you can wait for someone, even if you've never met them. When you look at other people and just know it's not them. You believe that person exists, even when there are so many options around you. But something in you says, not this. Wait a little longer." Sophie didn't answer. A second, maybe two. She sat very still, her hands resting on her knees, her gaze lowered, not at him, not at the window, just down. The words were still there, repeating quietly inside her, and she didn't stop them. Then she looked up. He was staring at the window, calm, unaware. "Are those your words?" she asked. He glanced at her. "I don't know," he said. "Feels like just a thought. Been there for a while." Sophie nodded. "It's a good thought," she said, evenly. She didn't say anything else, but inside her heartbeat had quickened, and she noticed it. Reflection. Toward morning, the train seemed to slow down. Or maybe it just felt that way, when the night had gone on too long and your eyes had grown heavy. They had been talking for hours. The conversation had carried itself, and then, just as naturally, it faded. Sophie looked at the window. Darkness outside, and in it the reflection of the compartment. Dim light, the outline of the shelves, and him, across from her, slightly to the side in the glass. She wasn't looking at him, she was looking at the reflection. He rubbed his eyes with both hands, tired, reached for his glasses, took them off, set them on the table.
covered his eyes for a second with his palms. Sophie kept looking at the window. In the dark glass, his face without the glasses. Just for a moment. Blurred, incomplete, but she saw enough. He put the glasses back on, lowered his hands, looked at the window again as if nothing had happened. Sophie looked away. Something inside her shifted, quiet, unnamed, somewhere in between. She didn't say anything. The conversation returned, softer now, the night already giving way. They talked about small things, favorite seasons, why autumn feels different from summer, whether there's a difference between loneliness and being alone. There is, Sophie said. Loneliness is when you don't want to be alone, but you are. Being alone is when you choose it. You choose it, he said. Not a question. I try to, she answered. He was quiet for a moment. I haven't chosen in a long time, he said softly. Things just kept going. She didn't respond. He didn't seem to expect her to. Outside, the darkness was beginning to thin. Not quite dawn yet, just a subtle shift, like the night was loosening its grip. We'll be there soon, he said. Yeah. Neither of them moved. Neither reached for their things. A few more minutes and the train began to slow. The first outlines of the outskirts appeared, scattered lights, tracks, dark shapes of buildings. Sophie watched it all pass by and thought how quickly the night had gone. Dawn and departure. The train stopped at 5:47. The station was half asleep. A few people on the platform and that cold early light, the in-between hour when the city hasn't quite decided if it's awake yet. They gathered their things in silence. He took his bag down from the shelf. She zipped up her jacket. Small, ordinary movements, the kind that mean the journey is over. Sophie stood in the corridor, and he stood beside her. Thanks for the company, he said. Thank you, she replied. A pause followed. She thought about asking something, and didn't. He stayed quiet, too. Take care, he said finally. You too. He stepped out first and walked along the platform. Dark sweater, bag over his shoulder. He didn't look back. Sophie stood in the doorway, watching, as the train started moving again. He stepped onto the platform and stopped. He took out his phone, looked at the screen, and realized he didn't even know her name. He stood there while people passed around him. He could have turned back. The train was still there for another minute. But he didn't. The train began to move, and he watched it go, knowing something wasn't right. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked away. Part 3. The first recognition. A week passed. Sophie came back from Claire's place, rested, the way she had wanted to. No plans, no rush. 3 days had been just enough. She brought back a small jar of homemade jam Claire had given her, and the memory of 3 quiet mornings with coffee in someone else's kitchen. She thought about the train. Not all the time, but she did. She replayed the night in fragments, certain lines, the feeling of a conversation that had carried itself. She tried to understand why she hadn't asked his name. She never quite figured it out. On Saturday evening, she was at Emma's. Emma was in the other room, feeding the baby. Her husband was away for the weekend. Sophie sat on the couch with a cup of tea, doing nothing, which in itself felt like a luxury. Emma came back, picked up the remote from the floor, and turned on the TV. There's an interview coming up. I love him. You don't mind? No, Sophie said. She wasn't really watching, just turning the cup slowly in her hands, lost in her own thoughts. On the screen, a studio, 2 chairs, a host asking questions.
The guest answered calmly, confidently. Sophie looked down at her tea. Then she heard it. Not at once. First, just a voice. Then, words. She looked up. On the screen, he was answering a question about love. Love is when you can wait for someone even if you've never met them. When you look at other people and just know it's not them. You believe that person exists even when there are so many options around you. But something in you says, not this. Wait a little longer. A second, maybe two. Then he reached into his pocket and took out his glasses, thick, dark frames, and put them on slowly. Emma said almost casually, "You know, he never wears glasses, not even sunglasses. Must be for a role or something." Sophie kept looking at the screen. Then the gesture. He ran his hand through his hair, brushing his fringe across his brow, slowly, absent-mindedly, one after another. Not all at once, just pieces falling into place. The voice, the glasses, the gesture, and the reflection in the window, that blurred, incomplete moment she hadn't quite seen but had somehow kept. She set her cup down. "Soph, are you listening?" Emma said. "I'm saying he's just—" "I hear you," Sophie said, evenly. On the screen, the host was congratulating him on his engagement. He smiled, said a few words about the wedding, a beautiful couple, everything perfect. Emma kept talking. Sophie didn't hear her. Inside, silence. That particular kind of silence that comes when two truths arrive at the same time and you don't know which one matters more. She knew it was him, and she knew he was getting married. Emma looked at her. "You okay?" "I'm fine, really." She picked up her cup, took a sip, and inside, quiet, steady, unchanged, "I will believe." Engagement as a wall. She got home late. Emma didn't notice or pretended not to. They stayed a little longer, had more tea, talked about small things. Sophie answered, smiled when she had to, laughed in the right places. Everything as usual, except she was somewhere else. At home, she sat on the windowsill, her usual place, with a cup in her hands and the night city beyond the glass. She thought, not in panic, not emotionally, but just carefully, laying things out in her mind. She went over that night again, the words, the gesture, the reflection, and then the TV, the studio, the host saying, "Let me congratulate you on your engagement." He had smiled, thanked him, and said a few warm, sincere things about his fiancée. Sophie looked out the window. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe the words were just words. People say things like that all the time. Maybe the gesture meant nothing, and she was just connecting things that weren't connected. Maybe the reflection in the window had been nothing at all. She went through it all calmly and honestly, not trying to convince herself either way. And still, she knew, the same way she had known that number 22 years ago. Without proof, without logic, she just knew it was him. The city below moved in its usual rhythm, lights, shadows, distant figures crossing the street. She closed her eyes. He was engaged, a public figure with a beautiful story, a perfect narrative, and she was no one, a stranger from a night train, a woman whose name he didn't even know. This didn't lead anywhere, she knew that. And still. She opened her eyes and looked at the city again. Her lips moved barely. "I will believe." Steady. Almost. He got back from the trip on Monday morning. "Matthew, you've got an interview at 3, his manager said, handing him the week's schedule. Filming, interviews, lunch with a producer, a fitting for a new role. He glanced through it, nodded, and slipped his phone into his pocket. He went home. He walked into the apartment and took off his jacket. He didn't hang it right away, but left it on the back of a chair in the hallway. He went into the kitchen, put the kettle on, and sat down. The kettle boiled, but he didn't move. Somewhere outside, a tram rattled past, distant, then closer, then gone again. The apartment was quiet in that particular way it is after you've been away for a few days. Everything in its place, and somehow not. He sat there, not moving. After a while, he picked up a book from the windowsill and opened it where the bookmark was. He looked at the page, but he didn't read. He replayed the night, not all of it, just fragments, not Lisbon, not the carousel, just one thing, the way she had said, "You too." Simple, nothing extra, but somehow exact, as if the words weighed exactly what they were supposed to weigh, no more, no less. And the way she held her tea with both hands, even when it had already gone cold, just holding it. He didn't know where she lived or what she did. He knew she was going to visit a friend somewhere for a few days, and that she had a friend who adored some actor. He smiled at that, briefly, to himself. That was it. A few days later, he was on set. Between takes, he stood off to the side, waiting for the lighting to be adjusted. Someone from props walked past with a tray, food for extras, random items for the scene, and in the middle of it, pink cotton candy. Just a prop, just decoration. He was already walking away, then stopped. He looked back and held the look a second too long. "Matthew, we're ready," the assistant called. He stepped onto the mark, and the director gave the cue. During the first take, he started the line and lost it for a second, just enough to feel it. Again, the director said, calm, no comments. Matthew nodded and reset. The second take was clean, but the smell stayed with him, light, sugary, almost childish. It lingered for 20 minutes. The days that followed blurred together. Filming, meetings, wedding planning, routine. He moved through it automatically. That evening, his fiancée showed him her phone with 2 photos of bouquets. "Which one?" she asked. He looked. White flowers in one, pink in the other. Both good. He knew he was supposed to answer, but he didn't. He just stared at the screen. "White," he said finally. She nodded and made a note. Later, he couldn't remember which one he had chosen. But somewhere deeper, somewhere you don't lie to yourself, he had known for a long time. He knew it before the train. He just never stopped long enough to face it. Stopping meant changing something. He ran a hand over his face and closed his eyes for a second. Normal, that's what he told himself. Normal is when there's nothing to complain about and nothing you feel the need to protect. That night on the train didn't break anything. It just showed the contrast clearly and without mercy. A few hours of something real next to 2 years of saying the right things at the right time. He sat in the kitchen. Evening light fell through the window, long, slanted, autumn tail. Somewhere behind the wall, the elevator hummed, stopped, and moved again. His fiancée came in, asked something, and left. He answered. After a while, he picked up his phone, looked at the screen, didn't open anything, and put it back down. He didn't even know her name. Part 4. The Break. She came over Tuesday evening. Matthew was home, reading, or trying to. He heard the key in the lock and stepped into the hallway. She stood by the door, coat still on, bag over her shoulder, and he knew immediately. This conversation had already happened for her, more than once. He just hadn't been there for it. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I'm listening." She spoke calmly, no drama, no raised voice. "There's someone, has been for a while. She tried to ignore it, but she doesn't want to keep building something here when something else is already there. It wouldn't be fair to him or to herself." Matthew listened. Somewhere in the middle of it, he realized he wasn't surprised. Not at all. He waited, just in case something would come later. Shock, anger, anything. Nothing did. She stopped and looked at him, tense, like she was bracing for something. "I'm glad for you," he said. She blinked. "What?" "If there's someone, that's a good thing. It is." She was quiet for a second. "You're not angry?" "No." "Matthew." "It's okay," he said. "Really." She stood there a moment longer, then nodded slowly, as if checking whether it was actually true. Then she left. The door closed softly. He went back to the kitchen, sat down, and set the book on the table. He listened to himself. There was no pain, no resentment, just quiet. Not empty, just quiet. The kind that comes when something that's been pressing on you for a long time stops. His publicist called the next morning. He listened to the suggested statement and agreed with the wording. "We both made an honest choice." That sounded right. Let it be that. He ended the call and sat by the window. For the first time in a long while, there was nowhere inside him that needed to rush.
The interview was scheduled for Thursday. He hadn't asked for it. The network suggested it, and his manager agreed. Comment on the breakup, close the story, give the media what they needed. Standard. Matthew said yes, not just because he was supposed to. The studio was familiar. He'd been here dozens of times. 2 chairs, soft lighting, a host he'd known for years. An assistant adjusted his mic. 30 seconds, then 5, then they were live. The host asked about the breakup, careful, professional. Matthew answered the same way. "She's a good person, it ended well, these things happen." The host nodded, moved on, and asked about upcoming projects. Matthew answered. And at the same time, he was thinking. He didn't know where she was or how to find her, but there was a chance. He wasn't searching, not exactly. He was just speaking to the camera. The host asked something about a new role. Matthew answered, then paused. He reached into his pocket, took out his glasses, the thick frames, and put them on slowly. He looked straight into the lens, not at the host, not at the room, at the camera, at wherever she might be. "There's a place in the city," he said. "They make the best cotton candy in the world, right next to an old carousel." A small pause. "I'd like to try it again. Maybe Wednesday, 6 in the evening." He took the glasses off, slipped them back into his pocket, and turned back to the host. "Sorry, yes, the new projects." The host let out a slightly awkward laugh. The audience followed, unsure why. Backstage, his manager was already watching the monitor with the expression of someone mentally drafting explanations for the press. Matthew didn't see him. He kept talking, even, calm, about roles, plans, what's next. Now he would wait. He knew how to wait. Or maybe he was just learning. She almost doesn't go. She saw the interview on Tuesday on YouTube. Emma had sent the link with a message, "He's gotten kind of strange." Sophie opened it and watched without much attention at first. He spoke about the breakup, calm, brief, then about new projects and plans. And then he reached into his pocket. She already knew. She didn't move, just watched the screen as he put the glasses on, looked into the camera, and spoke about the carousel, the cotton candy, Wednesday, 6 o'clock. He took the glasses off, put them back in his pocket, and kept talking. Sophie set her phone down on the table and just sat there. Outside was an ordinary evening in an ordinary city. People walking home from work, some with bags, some on their phones. Somewhere below, a building door slammed, loud and sharp. Then it was quiet again. She didn't move. He could have meant someone else. A lot of people knew that park. The glasses, probably for a role. All of it could be explained. She knew anyway. Tuesday passed. She went to bed late but couldn't fall asleep, lying on her back and staring at the ceiling,
the same ceiling, the same room. No ее мысли продолжали кружить, не давая покоя. On Wednesday, she woke up early, before the alarm. She lay still with her eyes closed, then got up and made coffee. She drank it standing by the window. Outside, everything was gray. A tram passed down the street, stopped, waited, and moved again. The day went on as usual. Work, emails, lunch, work again. She answered messages, reviewed edits, took calls, everything in its place. At 4, she realized she'd been staring out the window for 5 minutes. At 5, she closed her laptop and sat at the table. A minute. 2. She stood up, walked to the closet, and took out a jacket, gray, comfortable. She put it on and zipped it. She stood in the middle of the room, looking at her hands. Then she unzipped it, took it off, went back to the couch and sat down. She left the jacket beside her, not hanging it up. This is stupid. He's a public figure. It was one night on a train, a line he could have said to anyone. If she goes and he's not there, she'll just be standing there alone. She didn't move. Outside, it was getting darker, that in-between time, not day anymore, not quite night. 5:50. She looked at the jacket. It lay beside her, one sleeve slipping slightly off the edge. She took a breath, stood up, put it on, didn't think anymore, just put it on and left. The park. He arrived at 5:20. No security, no team, just him. Dark sweater, hands in his pockets. He walked down the path, past benches where older women sat with their grandchildren, past a flower bed already cleared for the season, just dry soil left behind. An autumn park, bare, quiet, a little sad. He stopped by the cotton candy stand and watched the carousel turning slowly, empty, turning for no one, with that same soft metallic creak, steady, almost comforting. He smiled. Pink cotton candy in the stand, streetlights flickering on, one by one, along the path. Not fully bright yet, just present. He waited. People passed by, families, couples, someone walking a dog. A woman with a stroller stopped nearby, brought cotton candy and moved on. No one recognized him. He stood there like anyone else in the park, and that felt right. At 5:45, he decided if she didn't come by 6, he would leave. Time moved. 5:50, 5:53, 5:56. At 5:58, he saw her. From a distance, dark blonde hair, gray jacket, walking down the path. Not in a hurry. He knew it was her immediately, not by her face, but by the way she walked, by the way she held herself. She saw him, stopped for a second, and just stood there, looking. Then she kept walking. He exhaled, like he had only just remembered how. She came closer and stopped beside him. Close. She looked at him calmly, as if she had time. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come," he said. She smiled, just a little. "I told you," she said, "I would believe." He looked at her and didn't say anything. The carousel kept turning, that same quiet metallic creak, even, steady. Somewhere nearby, a child asked for cotton candy. The streetlights glowed along the path, and in that light, the park felt different, warmer, smaller, as if it had narrowed down to only what mattered. They stood there. Nothing else was needed.